The first thing she said after falling was not that her ankle hurt. It was my name. She looked up at me from the pavement, pale and embarrassed, and whispered, "Please don't tell anyone, my dad." I had no idea why those words would matter until 3 hours later, when the front door opened, an older man stepped onto the porch, looked directly at me, and shook my hand with a grip so firm it almost hurt. Then he said the words that made my stomach drop, "So you're him." Finally. If you believe kindness can change a person's life, that forgiveness can heal wounds we cannot see, and that sometimes the smallest act of compassion arrives exactly when someone needs it most, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes, the person we think is simply a coworker is carrying a story far heavier than we ever imagined. My name is Everett Cole, and until that Tuesday afternoon, I thought I knew my coworker Marlo Bennett pretty well. We had worked together for almost 2 years at a small architectural firm in Connecticut. Marlo was the kind of person everyone noticed but few people truly understood. She was intelligent, organized, quietly funny, and almost painfully independent. She never asked anyone to carry anything for her, never stayed after meetings to complain, and never talked about her family. If someone offered help, she smiled politely and said she had it handled. I admired that about her, although sometimes I wondered if being independent was simply the safest way she had learned to survive. That afternoon, our office had spent several hours reviewing plans for a community center renovation. The meeting ended shortly after lunch, and everyone began gathering their folders while sunlight poured through the tall windows. Marlo was walking across the parking lot toward her car when her foot caught on a broken edge in the pavement. I heard a sharp cry and turned just in time to see her fall. Her folder scattered across the concrete, pages sliding beneath parked cars. She tried to stand, but the moment she put weight on her left foot, her face tightened with pain. I rushed over and crouched beside her. She insisted she was fine, but her ankle was already swelling. I gathered her papers while another coworker called the office manager. Marlo kept apologizing, as though injuring herself had somehow inconvenienced everyone around her. When I offered to drive her home, she immediately refused. She said she could call a rideshare, then she tried to reach for her phone and nearly fell again. That was when I gently told her that pride was not going to heal her ankle. For the first time, she stopped arguing. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not anger or embarrassment. It was fear. Then she quietly asked me not to tell her father. I thought she was worried he would be upset that she had gotten hurt. I told her I would not say anything unless she wanted me to, and I helped her carefully into my car. She gave me her address, and the entire drive she stared out the window, holding an ice pack against her ankle. The afternoon sun moved across the dashboard as we passed quiet neighborhoods and rows of old trees beginning to lose their summer brightness. I tried making small talk, but Marlo barely responded. Finally, I asked if she was afraid of her father. She shook her head. Then she said something that stayed with me for the rest of the drive. She told me she was afraid of disappointing him. There was a difference, she explained, between being afraid of someone and being afraid that someone you loved would look at you differently. Her father, Graham Bennett, had spent most of his life working with his hands. He had raised Marlo after her mother died when Marlo was 14. According to Marlo, he had sacrificed everything for her. He had worked weekends, skipped vacations, repaired their house himself, and somehow made sure she could attend college without debt. He had always told her that she could become anything she wanted. The problem was that Marlo had spent years believing she owed him perfection in return. She had never told him about the panic attacks she sometimes experienced before important presentations. She had never told him how lonely she felt after her mother died. She had never told him that she had turned down a promotion because she was terrified of failing. And she certainly had never told him that she sometimes came home from work, sat alone in her kitchen, and cried because she was exhausted from pretending she had everything under control. As she spoke, I realized that the woman everyone at work admired for being strong had built that strength around a secret fear of being weak. When we reached her house, she tried to get out of the car without my help. She managed 2 steps before nearly collapsing. I caught her by the arm and helped her toward the porch. She looked embarrassed again, but this time she did not apologize. The front door opened before we reached it. A tall man with silver hair stood there wearing a faded blue work shirt. He looked older than I expected, but there was still something powerful in the way he carried himself. His eyes immediately went to Marlowe's injured ankle, then to me. For a moment, nobody spoke. Marlowe looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her. Her father walked down the porch steps. I expected anger. Instead, he came directly toward me, held out his hand, and said, "So you're him." Finally. I stared at him, completely confused. Marlowe closed her eyes. Graham smiled sadly and explained that he had heard about me for months. Apparently, I was not simply her coworker. I was the person Marlowe talked about whenever she accidentally let her guard down. She had told him about the time I stayed late to help her finish a difficult presentation. She had told him how I remembered the coffee she liked when she was having a difficult morning. She had mentioned that I once defended her during a meeting when a senior partner unfairly blamed her for an error she had not made. She had even told him that I was the only person at work who never treated her independence like a wall that needed to be broken. Graham had apparently wanted to meet me for months. Marlowe looked mortified. I laughed softly and told him that I had no idea she talked about me at home. He looked at his daughter and said that was the problem. She talked about everyone else but almost never talked about herself. Something changed in Marlowe's face. For the first time that day, she stopped trying to hide. Her father helped her inside while I carried her bag and paperwork. The house was warm and modest, filled with old photographs. On one wall was a picture of Marlowe as a little girl standing beside her mother and father. In another, she was wearing a graduation gown. There were photographs from birthdays, school plays, camping trips, and ordinary family afternoons. But there was one photograph that made me pause. It showed Marlowe at about 15, standing beside her father. They were both smiling, but Graham looked much younger. Marlowe noticed me looking at it. She told me that photograph was taken a year after her mother died. Then she said something I never expected. She told me that after her mother died, Graham became so afraid of losing his daughter that he started trying to protect her from everything. He pushed her to succeed because he believed success would keep her safe. Every bad grade became a crisis. Every disappointment became something they needed to fix. Every mistake felt bigger than it really was. Graham had thought he was teaching his daughter how to survive. Instead, he had accidentally taught her that love had to be earned through achievement. Her father sat quietly after she said this. Then his shoulders dropped. He admitted that she was right. He told her that he had spent years believing that if he could make her strong enough, the world could never hurt her. He had not realized that his expectations had become another kind of wound. Marlowe began to cry. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just quiet tears that seemed to come from years of holding everything inside. Her father reached for her hand. He told her that he did not need a perfect daughter. He needed his daughter. He did not care if she failed, changed careers, made mistakes, needed help, or simply had a bad day. He only wanted her to stop believing she had to carry everything alone. Marlowe squeezed his hand. Then she looked at me. She told me that she had been afraid to let me help her because she had started caring about what I thought of her. That confession surprised both of us. There was no dramatic romance, no sudden promise, no perfect moment. There was simply honesty. I told her that I had never thought she was weak. I thought she was tired. And sometimes, I said, there was nothing weak about needing someone to sit beside you while you caught your breath. Graham looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. He told me that was exactly what he had been trying to teach his daughter for years, but apparently she had needed to hear it from someone else. The next several weeks changed all three of us. Marlo went to physical therapy and slowly recovered. She also began talking openly with her father. Their relationship did not magically become perfect. They still disagreed. He still worried too much. She still tried to hide problems when she felt overwhelmed. But now they noticed the pattern. And they talked about it. At work, Marlo changed too. She began asking for help without apologizing. She stopped staying late simply because she thought everyone expected her to. She even accepted the promotion she had once been too afraid to take. One afternoon, months after the accident, she invited me to her father's house for lunch. Graham stood on the porch when I arrived. This time, he did not look at me like a stranger. He simply smiled and shook my hand. He told me that when Marlo first described me, he had been suspicious. He thought I was another person who admired her strength without understanding the cost of it. Then he thanked me for helping her home that day. I told him I had only driven a few miles. He shook his head and said sometimes a person does not remember the distance you traveled. They remember that you came when they needed someone. Those words stayed with me. Because that day taught me something I had never understood before. People do not always need us to solve their problems. Sometimes they simply need us to notice that they are struggling. Sometimes kindness is not a grand gesture. It is picking up scattered papers from a parking lot. It is opening a car door. It is sitting quietly while someone finally admits they are scared. It is reminding someone that needing help does not make them weak. And sometimes, kindness reaches farther than we ever realize. A simple ride home had given Marlo the courage to tell her father the truth. Her truth had given Graham the chance to apologize. And his apology had given his daughter permission to stop carrying a burden she had mistaken for love. Months later, Marlo and I were walking through the same parking lot where she had fallen. Her ankle had healed completely. She stepped over the broken pavement and laughed. She said she still could not believe that one twisted ankle had changed her life. I told her maybe the ankle was not the thing that needed healing. She stopped walking. For a moment, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Then she smiled and said maybe I was right. Before we reached our cars, she thanked me again. I told her she did not owe me anything. She said she knew. That was what made her smile. Because for the first time, she understood that kindness was not a debt. It was a gift. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And before you go, leave a comment telling us what you believe the greatest lesson of this story is. Is it that asking for help is a sign of strength, that forgiveness can repair relationships, or that sometimes one small act of kindness can change an entire life? Because we never truly know what someone is carrying behind their smile. The coworker who seems confident may be terrified inside. The parent who seems demanding may be acting out of fear. The friend who says they are fine may desperately need someone to stay. And the stranger who helps us when we fall may become the person who reminds us that we were never meant to stand alone. Sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to stop, reach out a hand, and say, without judgment, I've got you. And sometimes, that is enough to help someone finally believe they can let themselves be loved.